Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for the 29th of July, 2015. Some stuff to talk about in the Atlantic Basin way out here. Believe it or not, in the far eastern Atlantic, right off the coast of Africa, the National Hurricane Center has identified an area. We call it 94L, so do they. It's just an easier way to refer to these systems rather than just saying it's a blob of clouds or a tropical wave or a low pressure disturbance or what have you. But it is disturbance number one in their outlook list here, but it's also called 94L, and it's located way, way, way out in the extreme eastern Atlantic, has a 10% chance of developing over the next couple of days, and a 30% chance of developing over the next 5 days. This is a great satellite picture of the disturbance, or the tropical wave, 94L. It has a very well-defined low-pressure area with it. Although it's fairly weak in nature, it certainly is easy to see that it's kind of curled up here, and it emerged from Africa just in the last day or so. About 100 or so of these easterly tropical waves come off of Africa, these impulses of energy, and they make their way westward. Some of them develop, most of them do not. This one has a chance, but let's look at some of the factors surrounding sort of pros and cons. Well, right now, in the pro column, the tropical wave is located right in here, and this is a sea surface temperature anomalies chart showing us pretty much above normal sea surface temperatures in this box where the system was located. But as it moves westward, it'll move over slightly cooler than average sea surface temperatures, and that could work against it a little bit. But it's interesting that these tropical waves are coming off, and yes, they do try to take advantage of any warm water that they can find themselves over the top of, and this one, 94L, no exception. Notice too in the water vapor chart here, this is a really neat product from the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies. This is about 72 hours ago, and you can see out here in the tropical Atlantic, pretty good moisture surge comes off, and then you see right there at the end, watch how the moisture curls up, being pulled up out of the intertropical convergence zone. You can see a lot of these little different red colored pixels coming in here, and I can zoom into this too. We can see it a lot better, hopefully. And notice right there towards the end of the frames, the last day or so, you see this system kind of wind up right here. That's a pretty healthy moisture surge that comes off. There's still some Saharan air sitting out here to the north of the tropical wave, but down here closer to the intertropical convergence zone and embedded within this deep moisture surge, we do have this small potential for development. You notice too how the flow coming from east to west rather rapidly into the Caribbean. This area has moistened up a little bit too. You see this moisture coming in, so maybe the pendulum is gradually shifting towards a slightly better environment overall in what we call the main development region out here. You notice early it's not as moist, but late at the end of the 3-day period it does moisten up just a little bit more. Now, where it's located currently, wind shear, I know this is a very busy map. This is the west coast of Africa right here. These are the Cape Verde Islands, and here's our tropical wave curled up, 94L off the west coast. And the wind shear here is fairly light. We do have a pretty strong sort of easterly jet, if you will, coming off of Africa, pushing these tropical waves off. But then in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the wind is generally light, 5 to 10 knots at the most. It's fanning out in a clockwise fashion, this big anticyclone aloft, a large area of high pressure aloft, sort of a mini favorable upward motion area, if you will. And that's helping to keep this system alive for the time being. There is a little bit of a component where the wind is blowing across the system, but all things being equal, considering excuse me, the very strong El Nino that we have in place and the strong shear in the Caribbean, this has a nice little sandbox to play in, as it were. But once it leaves that sandbox, and this is what I said on Twitter today, the bully awaits. This is a very potent, just an enormous tropical upper tropospheric trough, or TUT, area of low pressure. and then just unbelievable shear coming out of the Caribbean here on the order of 40, 50 knots plus. Only in the eastern Atlantic is there an area, really the sandbox is the best analogy of protection for these systems. Now what can happen, and it's hard to know if this will happen, you get these tropical waves coming off and they migrate west, the shear machine knocks most of them into oblivion and they don't do anything. If you get enough of these over time, these systems out here, these tropical upper tropospheric troughs, or these tuts, some people call them king tut to be funny, because they are very, very potent. Sometimes these will retrograde west just a little bit or lift northeast and fill. They kind of go away for a time and maybe a week to 10 days. And that's all you need for one of these sort of innocuous tropical waves to come off. They get sheared for a bit. The upper level low takes off to the northeast or dives to the southwest, kind of opening a gateway for this to not only reach the United States perhaps, but also to intensify. And we just don't know which of these tropical waves, and there are several potent ones trying to come off Africa, I'll show you that in a moment, could do that. They may all be sheared apart, and none of them have a chance to develop. We'll just have to wait and see. But it's interesting to have something like this fairly early in the season. After all, it's only July 29th. It's typically not until the end of August that we look this far east for development. Now let me show you what the GFS is showing, or in some cases is not showing. This is the 5,000 foot level of the atmosphere, or about 850 millibars up. The atmosphere is built in layers basically, and this is the 850 millibar layer, and we're looking at the vorticity, or the spin in the atmosphere. Alright? And this will show us, we're looking for things that are round in nature, not oval shaped or amorphous looking, especially in the tropics. When a storm, a tropical cyclone, is more round. In fact, I have the wrong map here. Let me get back to where I need to be. This is the 500 millibar chart. I want to show you 850. We are looking for round blobs, if you will, instead of amorphous shaped ones. So let's take a look here at 24 hours from where we're sitting right now. And this is the image. Let me just center it. So out here is our tropical wave 94L, and you notice it's kind of stretched out, elongated, not very round looking, not much energy associated with it. There's another area of low pressure off the southeast coast, looks kind of like Mickey Mouse. See, right? Mickey Mouse ears there. And that's not very healthy for a tropical system to be looking. Again, we want something that looks round, concentric circles that indicate a very tight bundling of energy, and we're not seeing that with either system. So let's go out to 48 hours and see what we have out in the Atlantic Basin. And again, not much in the way of organization here, kind of stretched out, these lobes of energy coming off, and so that tells me this is not a very pronounced system. It's not reaching its potential, if you will, even at 72 hours. A little bit better organization with the system out here. See it right there? But it's very small, so it's very susceptible to even minor changes in the environment around it. And then another sort of embryo, if you will, kind of comes off. These literally look like little eggs in the atmosphere rolling off of Africa, trying to develop somewhere in the Atlantic Basin. Now let's skip ahead to about day 5 here, 120 hours, and you can see, again, not much in the way of energy associated with 94L, sort of a large pocket of low pressure, and then nothing really coming behind it in the day 5 time period. So at least the GFS tells me that at day 5, through day 5, we really don't have much, I don't want to say hope, but if you're looking for development, there is not much hope for this system to develop. Hopefully it's an appropriate way to put it. But then let's look out here, just for fun, at the 2 weeks time frame. All right, this is way out in about the middle part of August. This is the 14th. Granted, this is far out into the future, and the GFS may be just kind of sensing climatology. Well, it's mid-August. I'm supposed to create tropical cyclones, and so here are some. This is what you would look for. a pair of them out in the future. Is this going to actually be what the map looks like on the 14th of August? We'll have to wait and see, but this just kind of shows you what the pattern would look like if you have development that's really trying to take shape. A pretty strong area of high pressure to the north of these systems, and they would both presumably just keep marching on to the west. But this is what I was talking about. The GFS and other models, the Euro in its long-range forecast, and even the climate forecast system, which goes out to 45 days, is showing, as we get into August, a series of these strong impulses coming off and moving westward, and you just have to wonder, will there eventually be one that is able to sort of bust through this shear that's waiting out here? If this were to lift out and allow one of these through, well, it could be interesting as we get towards the mid and latter part of August. So there you go. That's a pretty detailed look at what's going on with 94L. Nothing in the Eastern Pacific to be of any concern right now, and so we won't even visit that region because it's quiet. We're generally in a downward phase of the MJO, meaning there's no large-scale, widespread, basin-wide upward motion going on, and so we're not expecting any development anywhere across the globe of any substantial, widespread, or intense nature over the next several days. But for now, keep an eye on 94L and see what happens with it. All right? Well, that's it from me for today. I always appreciate you tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll take a look each day at what happens with 94L. And then once this kind of goes away, if that is in fact what it's going to do, I am going to produce a special video highlighting our new storm surge cameras. I want to wait, though, until we really have nothing else to talk about, because that gives me something to talk about. And right now, 94L is the topic of conversation. But eventually, as we get through the next few days, I do want to make this presentation here for you guys to kind of see what the evolution of our storm surge cameras has been over the last decade, where we've been, how far we've come with it, and what we intend to do with this technology in the future, because we know it's just a matter of time that the major hurricane drought will end for the United States, and there'll be a very large storm surge event somewhere, and we have this amazing technology now that could be very useful, has very strong utility or usefulness for emergency management, for the media, for the public, and for scientists at the National Hurricane Center and NOAA's Hurricane Research Division, all of which I want to present to you in a separate video discussion after things either dissipate in the tropics and we go back to a quiet few days, or we'll just wait and see, right? Maybe I'll talk about it right before landfall. That would be interesting. Anyhow, enough for me for today. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. Thanks again for tuning in. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.